Good morning. Good morning. Today, I'm doing that wrong. Today is Sunday, April the 10th, 2022. Thank you for joining me. Oh, that's really frustrating. Give me 1 second. There we go. Thank you for joining me this morning. It's another beautiful day. Well, actually, I don't know about another, but spring is certainly starting to take hold, isn't it? And that's always very lovely. I personally am not a big fan of the winter time, so anything that leads to slightly warmer weather, especially when the grass is growing and we've got animals running around and stuff. That's the kind of weather I like. So it's nice that we've starting to get some blossoms coming in and everything. It's funny what investing in real estate, how the seasons matter. I mean, spring is when people start buying and selling. And, for obvious reason, right? A house looks a lot better, when the leaves are on the trees and the grass is grown in and I don't know what you want to call it. I guess nature is allowed to kind of beautify, the facade of your property in a way that in the summer, when the trees are bare and everything. There are some properties that might look like winter wonderlands. I'm thinking of like forested lots where like you have the nice trees in the background covered in snow. But for the most part, it's not when your house looks its best. And especially, after snow, and it's been a couple days and all the snow's turned brown and slushy and nasty and it's covered in salt and sand and stuff. It's no good. It's no good. So anyways, it's nice that we're entering into spring and oh, I'm missing the light. And a better season. Okay. I don't know if that makes a difference, but sorry. Okay. So first things first, I just want to say up front, there will not be a seminar next week. It's the Easter long weekend, and I just thought I'd put aside the time or not have to be up and doing a seminar so I can enjoy the weekend with my family. And hopefully you with yours, right? So that's what's going on next week. And in relation to that, I was thinking about Easter this morning, actually, as I was, brushing my teeth and getting ready for the day. And I was trying to decide if there would be a seminar next week. And ultimately, I made my decision. But I was thinking about Easter, and I was thinking about the Easter Bunny. And, we all know the story of the Easter Bunny, I think, I hope. And the Easter Bunny, I think, is a very interesting myth, I guess. Right? The Easter Bunny is a myth, and it's a very fascinating myth, right? Easter is obviously it's a Christian holiday. It's about the resurrection of Jesus and all that stuff, and so it is it's a Christian holiday. But Easter is also a pagan holiday. Very interesting history of religion. Is generally speaking, it is impossible for one religion to supplant another religion because the people like their traditions. So the religions that successfully supplant other religions tend to adopt the traditions of the religions that they're replacing. Christianity was very good at this. Christmas is Sol Invictus, which was a Roman holiday. Or Yule in the northern European places. Easter was, there's a couple names for Easter. I think the Saturnalia festival in northern and eastern Europe. It had a couple names, but basically the spring festival is basically kind of what Easter is, or historically was. And that is where we get the Easter Bunny from, right? The Easter Bunny doesn't come from the Christian tradition. It comes from this pagan tradition. And as do so many of the holiday figures, right? Like Santa Claus is not a pagan figure because he's based on Saint Nicholas, but there are variations of him, the guy who comes around on Yule and gives you stuff that had nothing to do with Christianity, but basically were also archetypes for Santa Claus and stuff like that. So it's fascinating how these things emerge and how their origins get lost to us. But the Easter Bunny specifically, I thought of, is a very funny myth. I don't personally know the origin of the myth. I couldn't tell you the history beyond knowing that it is not Christian and it is, Northern European, and those are the only things that I know. But I was thinking about the story of the Easter Bunny and what the Easter Bunny does and how it relates to investing. The Easter Bunny is a figure who works all year, collecting eggs. I don't know why. Was never clear to me. And they're chocolate eggs because he's from some magical world or something. So Easter Bunny's got a great gig. He spends all year finding eggs. And for some reason, he didn't get the memo that he's a bunny, not a squirrel. So he decides, like a squirrel, that he's going to hide his eggs, kind of like nuts. And so he hides them all over the place. Right? And so he works real hard all year finding eggs and hiding them so that he can have them presumably for a rainy day. I don't know. In my mind, I'm imagining that his eggs they're like the currency of his world, right? All the Easter bunnies or the fairy tale animals get together and they use chocolate eggs to pay each other for things. So he's hiding away his eggs, working hard all year long. And then Easter comes around. And lo and behold, thousands of little children from all over the world go out hunting for his eggs. And they find them. At least if they're kids like I was, they find those eggs and they eat the hell out of them because chocolate can't beat chocolate, right? Those, somebody bought some those Cadbury mini eggs. And it's not something that I buy typically, or that my family or anybody that I know really buys, because everybody in my family has a problem with chocolate. We all like it very, very much. So we tend to avoid stuff like those eggs because they're damn good. But somebody bought a bag of those eggs and they were delicious. So you go find those Cadbury chocolate eggs, they're going to be gone, right? Anyways, the Easter Bunny, he hides all of his eggs. And Easter comes around, the kids go find them. And so the day after Easter, the Easter Bunny goes looking for some of his stored up eggs. They're all gone. He's got to go do it again the next year. So every year, the Easter Bunny spends his year looking for chocolate eggs that he can stash away for a rainy day. And then the kids, they come and they eat the eggs. And I thought about this, it's a beautiful allegory. I don't think it was meant to be, but it is all the same. It's a beautiful allegory for saving your money. We have it happening right now. You see, you work real hard. Unfortunately, not like the Easter Bunny. You might work hard for years and years of your life, not a single year. And you save that money, whatever it is you can afford to save. It's not that easy to save money. Let's say you could put aside $5,000 a year. $5,000 a year is not bad. That's 10% of your income if you make $50K. It's 5% if you make $100. It's 2.5 if you make $200. So it's not so good if you're up in those higher brackets. But it's not a bad savings rate for someone of average means. Let's even say you're above average. Let's say you save 20% of your income, which would be $10,000 at $50K and $20,000 at 100 and $40 at 200, right? You stash that away. Now, in the current modern world, using the current modern monetary system, those savings are being stolen away from you by inflation. We all know that inflation does this. But how much is it doing it? Well, if you believe the latest statistics from the government, I think it's 4.5 or it's right around the 5% mark anyways. And, they're trying to argue that it's actually lower than that or higher and this and that. And of course, it's a very politicized thing. I would liken the statistic for inflation to the statistics in the television show The Wire. Hopefully you've all seen that show. Just if you enjoy good television, that's, as far as I'm concerned, one of the best shows that was ever made for TV. But anyways, if you haven't seen the show, there's a theme in that show that runs through all 5 seasons. And the theme is called, they refer to it in the show, it's called Juking the Stats. I think that's like an old school, like a 90s, early 2000s term, juking, but juking the stats. And basically, juking the stats is when you arrest somebody for, let's say, grand larceny, but then you bump that arrest down to being just burglary, so that you can say that the crime in a neighborhood is decreasing, because grand larceny is a worse crime than burglary, right? You turn an assault charge into a nuisance charge, right? You turn a drug deal, like a drug bust, into like a public disorder bust, right? That's juking the stats. So that way, statistically, if there's a bigger problem with crime, these are police officers, obviously, you hide that by reporting faulty statistics, right? If you have students in a school, right? Maybe you inflate the grade so that maybe, in a quote unquote fair system, these kids would be getting 50, but in your classroom, you give them what would be a 50 somewhere else, you give that actually a 70. So you pretend that kids who are failing are actually average students, right? And then you can say that your school is doing well, you deserve bonuses, whatever, right? And so we see this. Of course, this is exactly what our schools are like, and it is what our police departments do, and it is what our hospitals do, and et cetera, et cetera. And it is totally understandable because people respond to incentives, right? And so the stats get juked. And unfortunately, they do this, of course, at the Bank of Canada and at the various economic entities in the government as well, because at the end of the day, the reason why people juke the stats is because they think that you have basically a result that you want to hear. And if you don't hear it, maybe people will lose jobs. And the people in the government are not very interested in having to earn a living. So they will lie to you about having done their job so that you will continue to fund them. So we have this problem where stats are being juked. It's really hard to say how high inflation actually is. It's probably quite a bit higher than where it is reported to be. And obviously, you see this every single day if you go put gas in your car, because that's a heck of a lot more than 4.5% up, right? So something to keep in mind. I just thought of this Easter bunny, working all year to get these damn eggs, and the kids coming and eating them all the time. And I never saw the cartoon as a kid growing up at Easter time, where the Easter bunny was all upset and distraught because his eggs were gone. But, if I put you in that situation, you would be, right? And so the Easter bunny, he needs to learn a lesson that hopefully everybody here already knows. And that is that you do not stash your eggs for a rainy day. You trade them to someone for something that produces value. Ideally, perhaps, for a golden goose or two. To extend the fairy tale metaphor, right? Because at the end of the day, the thing that produces value will continue. Oh, well, hold on a second. I should qualify the statement. The thing that produces value, all things being equal, will continue to produce value into the future. And if inflation or whatever occurs, well, that's fine, because that inflation is just going to increase the value of the thing that produces the valuable thing produces. That was a convoluted sentence, but hopefully you followed me, right? And so something that's fundamental, everybody should know it, certainly that's listening to me, but still needs to be repeated and reiterated all the time, right? Your money is not safe if it's just money. It just isn't. That's not a safe way to keep money. And it's a funny thing. Just kind of as an aside, I think I just want to talk about a little bit. When you talk to people, just the general public, the people who are in the seminar do not count as the general public. So if you speak to them, you'll get a little bit different of a response. But if you speak to the general public, especially if you speak to them about rich people, let's talk to them about Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, or I don't know, name some other wealthy people that people like to point out how wealthy they are. Bill Gates, that kind of thing, right? If you talk to people about those individuals, lay people, the general public, and you explain to them that Elon Musk has a net worth of $254 billion or whatever it was last reported at, your average person pictures in their head that Elon Musk has a Scrooge McDuckian vault somewhere full of gold doubloons or paper money that he can dive into like a swimming pool and swim around in and make money angels or what have you. Now, of course, you know better. Elon Musk has no such pool of money. And in fact, he probably has to borrow money just like the rest of us, because as wealthy as he is, and he is incredibly wealthy for sure, there's no question about that, but as wealthy as he is, that wealth is not cash. That wealth is never cash. That wealth is not cash for anybody who's wealthy. That's not how wealth works. But it's very interesting to me how there is this very pervasive belief amongst people who do not possess wealth that having wealth is actually having cash money, which it is not. And not only is it not, but having cash money makes you poor. Not only does making cash money make you poor, but having cash money has historically always made you poor. Now, cash is actually quite valuable. There's this expression, cash is king. The expression is true, right? And you need look no further than real estate investing to know that a cash offer has more weight and therefore usually a slightly lower price behind it than a offer with a financing condition, right? Because cash is king, or put another way, a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush, right? That is, you giving me a sure thing today, which cash is a sure thing, is preferred by almost everybody to you saying to me, well, let's wait 30 days and see if my buddies will give me some money and then I'll get you two birds, right? So cash is king. There's some truth to that. However, cash is a terrible store of value. And historically, what I find so interesting about the whole cash thing is that historically, there have always been wealthy people. All throughout history, life is just unfair, right? Some people are better at accumulating than others are. So all throughout history, there have been wealthy people. But those wealthy people have never held their wealth as cash money, right? In ancient Rome, you used to own estates, vineyards, and farms. And farms was usually the way people held their value for much of history. Owning land was how you held value. Funny enough, we talk about real estate investing, how that could make you wealthy. And back in the day, it was land, maybe a vineyard instead of a housing, an apartment complex. But the principle remained the same. You buy the land holds the value. And if one day you want to access that value, you either apply for credit against the land or sell the land to access the underlying value. This is how you store and safeguard wealth. This is how you have always stored and safeguarded wealth. There has been a very concerted effort, and I'm not saying it's nefarious, I'm not saying it's a conspiracy, I'm just saying sometimes, there are incentives and people respond to them. There's been a very concerted effort for the last 150 years or so for very intelligent people to use their intellect to baffle everybody they can around them with their BS, and to use that BS to convince other people that they do not know anything about managing money, wealth, or finances, and that they should surrender or relinquish the responsibility of managing their own financial well-being to experts. I am not a fan of experts. Experts suck. You should read a book if you're curious about experts. It's called The Vision of the Anointed by Thomas Sowell. He explains essentially what experts are for real, because it's a word we all hear and yet it's kind of ill-defined. He gives a much better, more clear definition of what an expert is and how they work in our society and what they do. And experts they tend to be no good. And I will clarify that point, but I'm gonna move on for a second. So I wanted to talk a little bit this week, just briefly, about interest rate pressure. Now that we are a third of the way into April, and we now have most of the stats from last month being reported, we are seeing, and I've certainly seen it just watching the market, we are seeing perhaps the peak of an uptrend right now in housing prices in Ontario. Obviously, time will tell whether it is an actual top or whether we'll find more support and move to a higher price level. But it's looking like perhaps we've hit a peak, and maybe there's going to be a bit of a reversal in the market. Prices might start to trend downwards. It is looking that way. Certainly, if the rumored Bank of Canada interest rate hikes take place. I think they were just talking about another 50 basis points, or maybe another 50 a quarter or so after that. If those interest rate hikes do occur, they are going to put downwards pressure on housing prices. There's no question about that, especially in the GTA, where a lot of these homes are being bought on 90% financing, and something's going to have to give because people won't be able to make the payments. We're seeing this occur. It's very hard to say whether those rate hikes are going to actually take place, just because the government has a lot of interest in not paying more interest, especially if they want to continue to send their money to the Ukraine. Then it would be advantageous for them to be able to get that money at a lower interest rate. So that's something to consider. There's also been rumors I've seen at least popping up on my phone, and I've heard from a couple people mentioned to me that the government is planning to step in and they're going to make housing more affordable and blah, blah, blah. I'm of the opinion, not everybody will agree with me, but I'm of the opinion that one of the most dangerous words that a person can say to you is, I am from the government and I am here to help. I genuinely think that's one of the scariest friggin' things a person can say to you. Go ask some Native Americans about how things went with their family after some white people showed up to tell them they're here to help them with their education. There's a lot of stories throughout history of the well-intentioned, and that's what I'm going to call them. I think for the most part, the people in the government have good intentions. They have bad methodology, but they've got good intentions, I think, for the most part, right? But there's no shortage in history of people with good intentions creating hell on earth. No shortage of it. In fact, those are pretty much the only people who ever caused that situation to come about. I don't know exactly why that is. It does go back to the book I was recommending, though, The Vision of the Anointed. There are rumors that the government is going to step in. They're going to intervene. They're going to, I've heard crazy things like they're going to make it so you can't put in offers unseen, or they're going to ban foreigners from buying property in like Southern Ontario, etc., etc. I will tell you this much. I don't know what the government will do. Nobody does. You need a crystal ball for that. What I do know is it will fail. I know that. It doesn't matter what they choose to do. It won't work. Now, it's not to say it won't have an effect. It will have an effect. But it will not accomplish the stated goal, whatever that ends up being, hanging in the air like a turd. No, I'm going to back that statement up. The reason why experts suck is very simple. What the term expert means, what it really, really means at the end of the day, and think through this yourself. An expert is a person who will make a judgment, a determination, or a decision, who is not invested, interested, or affected by the outcome of that choice or decision. That's what an expert is. In other words, an expert is a person who has no stake in the decision or opinion for which they are espousing. So to give you an example, you're living in a house. You bought this house to shelter your family, and perhaps for a respite from the world when life gets a little bit tough. An expert comes along and says, no. The purpose of your house is not to protect you and your family, nor to provide you a respite from the rest of us. The purpose of your house, was to shelter some Native American arrowheads from 500 years ago. And we now need you to spend half the value of that house, which you probably don't have, but we don't care. We need you to spend that so that we can get those arrowheads out, because the arrowheads are much more important than your shelter, your home, or your financial security. That's what an expert is. And of course, you laugh, you go, ha ha ha, what a far-fetched scenario, Obviously, I know that there are people who care about arrowheads and blah, 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 but, that's not realistic. And yet, that is exactly what experts do, right? If you buy land, and you buy this land for a purpose, and then First of all, you buy the land for a purpose. Let's say you want to build some houses there. So you say, I'm going to build some shelter, perhaps for myself, perhaps for other people. Either way, it doesn't matter. Well, the experts in our society are going to require you to do an environmental impact study, right? They're going to require you to do an environmental impact study where they're going to tell you whether or not you can, quote unquote, impact the environment by building your home there, right? Now, lots of people will say, hey, Aaron, this is totally reasonable. It makes sense. That is one of the great things about experts, is experts have the air of reasonability. It does sound reasonable to do an environmental impact study, doesn't it? Right? Sounds reasonable to limit carbon emissions. It even sounds reasonable. I think everybody listening to me would agree that it sounds reasonable to have a rule enforcing seatbelts, for example. Now, anybody who is of a keen intellect will recognize that a seatbelt law is in opposition to you having freedom, right? That is, like it or not, freedom means your stupid self can get in a car with no seatbelt on and drive it into a wall if you want. That's freedom. So a seatbelt law tramples on freedom. Now, we're supposed to be a free-ish country, so it's interesting that we have seatbelt laws, right? Especially because, well, a seatbelt law doesn't protect me from you, right? It doesn't prevent externalities, which would be a good thing, right? You have no right to hit me with your car, right? You have every right to smash your car into a wall and kill yourself. That's freedom. Freedom does not entitle you to hurt me, right? So we have seatbelt laws that ostensibly don't protect anybody except for the person in the vehicle who's making their own decisions and could be free. And we have them. And we have them, of course, because it sounds very, very reasonable. Let's have seatbelts. They'll protect people. They'll keep people alive. They will prevent fatalities and accidents. And fatalities and accidents are tragic, and we hate to see them, and they destroy families. So we're going to make it illegal for you to drive around without a seatbelt on. Okay. First of all, there's a question of, is this a wise policy? And the answer is, of course, no, it's not. Because how the hell are you going to enforce it, right? You don't have someone in the car with these people. There's no real way to enforce it. It's a silly policy. Now, what we did as a society, because we do not live in a wise society, is we said, yeah, this is going to be very hard to enforce. So let's give the police more powers to intrude upon our lives, stop us, pull us over, get into our vehicles, so that they can enforce this and make sure that we're safe from ourselves. So immediately you have a bad trade-off because you've decided, okay, I'm going to privilege, or I'm going to elevate this one concern over all other concerns. And so we've seen the escalation. Of course, this is a decision that was made 40, 50 years ago. But we've seen the escalation of police, both in terms of their militarism in their tactics, training, and technology, right? As well as in their belligerence, in that they believe that they're here basically to subjugate the population. You saw that very clearly with the Ottawa protests earlier this year. You saw it last year in the States there. They did their protests and whatever, and the police cracked down on it. And you see this all the time, right? The police coming out in their Gestapo gear with their tear gas and stuff, right? So we've seen sort of this escalation, this militarization of the police, as we've asked them to do more things that intrude on people's freedoms, that therefore require them to be more intrusive. So it's probably a bad trade-off right away, right? Unfortunately, the picture gets worse, right? By passing these seatbelt laws, of course, we've now introduced a cost. So cars are now more expensive than they otherwise would be for a feature that for most people may or may not confer a benefit. That is, people who don't want to wear seatbelts don't wear them anyways. And people who do want to wear seatbelts and would have wanted to wear seatbelts would have gladly bought them as just an additional safety add-on to their vehicle anyways, right? Which is the way most people do these things. Unfortunately, the passage of the law that introduced the seatbelts caused no reduction in automobile fatalities, which is quite paradoxical, right? You would think, okay, whatever, Aaron, the police thing is a problem, and the this and the that. Okay, I can see all of those concerns, but at least you got to tell me passing this law saved lives. It was all worth it in the end because it saved lives. It didn't save lives. I did change the people who die in car accidents, though. As it turns out, when people wear seatbelts, you introduce something called moral hazard. I've talked to you about moral hazard before. It's actually an insurance term, or perhaps an economics term. It's kind of hard to say. But basically what moral hazard says is that, you know, actually I'm gonna define it in a different sense. I'm gonna define it in an economic sense, because maybe that'll make moral hazard more clear to you. Okay, in economics, shoot, I forget the economist's name. Doesn't matter. In economics, there's a principle. I mean, there's a lot of principles, but there's a principle about energy consumption. And the principle about energy consumption goes as such. As you increase the availability of energy, okay, or as you decrease the cost of producing energy, either or, you will not see a reduction in the utilization of energy. Right? So if I make it cheaper to produce electricity, we will not use less. We will not. Sorry. If I make it possible to produce more electricity, which therefore will make it cheaper, we will not see a reduction in overall costs of electricity. Instead, we will consume more electricity so that essentially our consumption level, our spending on electricity stays the same. So making electricity cheaper does not reduce people's electrical bills. They just find new things to use that electricity for. That's essentially what the principle tells us. I wish I remembered the economist who discovered this. And he discovered this using energy, more referring to fuel than electricity. But it holds true across all things. It even holds true in the human body. It's a very weird phenomenon. And anyways, this phenomenon also describes to us essentially moral hazard. And it goes like this, okay? If I give you a discount on something, you will buy more of it. I know this and you know this because this is what supply and demand tells us. But not only does supply and demand tell us this, we also know this because people like to shop at stores like Bulk Barn and Costco, right? And what is the savings that you get at a store like Costco or Bulk Barn? It is that you buy more and you spend less, right? Pretty straightforward. Everybody understands this. The reason why Amazon and Walmart have the lowest prices of all the stores that you go to is because they buy more and therefore they pay less, right? It's a very, very simple principle, right? Now, you have a problem if you understand this, which is that if you're trying to control or incentivize the behavior of people, then you have to understand that making something cheaper will introduce more of it into the marketplace. Okay, pretty simple, pretty straightforward. So what moral hazard tells us is that if we insure against the risk, or if we protect against the risk, in this case, seatbelts, right? Essentially what we are doing in either case is we're reducing the risk. In other words, we are reducing the cost, right? We're reducing the cost, right? Obviously, if you get in a car, an old crappy car from like the 1950s, you get one of those cars where hitting the curb basically will kill you. You do not speed. And you do not speed because hitting the curb will kill you. So you take it slow, you take it nice and easy. If you get in a modern 2022, I don't know, Acura or whatever, let's make it something decent. That car can do 280 kilometers an hour without hardly breaking a sweat. And probably you're not going to go that fast. That'd be insane, although some people will. But you might push that thing 20, 30 kilometers above the speed limit, right? And certainly if you don't, there are plenty of people who do, right? So by introducing the safety feature, like the seatbelt, what ended up happening was average speeds increased. Because the seatbelt meant that an accident that maybe at 30 kilometers would have injured you, now you need to be going at 45 kilometers. So guess what? People start going 45 kilometers. And so the speed at which traffic accidents occurred before and after the passage of the seatbelt laws increased. And so the seatbelt laws did not end up reducing the number of fatalities. They just meant that people died in higher speed car crashes, either at a speed that exceeded the threshold safety factor provided by the seatbelts, or in collisions wherein they lost control at high speed, but as a result of their higher speed, their vehicle traveled further and was able to then harm, maim, or kill pedestrians. this is one of the problems with first order thinking. We have a world full of first order thinking. You were probably taught in school to be a first order thinking. It's really easy to be a first order thinker, and it's very hard to think about things with any greater depth than that, which is unfortunate because the world doesn't happen on the first order, right? Your intended consequence, your intended outcome of your first action, right? That first order consequence is very, very rarely where the chain of consequence stops, right? There are follow-on effects. People react to what you do, right? And so the world adapts. It's not as straightforward as, oh, we're going to do this, and then everybody was just, no, people adapt, right? Obviously, you see this here in Canada. We have high taxes. They're talking about making them go higher. The higher the taxes go, what do you think more and more Canadians are going to start doing? Well, they'll do several things. I mean, it's a lot of people in Canada, right? So there's a lot of different alternatives. Some people will stop working. They'll just say, screw it. This is not worth it for me. I'm done. I'm out, right? That's not an insignificant proportion of people when we're talking about an entire country, but you'll get that. Some people will continue to work, but they'll do everything in their power to hide or shelter their income from the government. Some people will continue to work and they will just illegally not report their income to the government, right? Some people will leave. They'll move to the States or the Bermuda or wherever, right? And they will stop paying taxes altogether to Canada, right? And it's very fascinating because taxes is one of those things where economics is kind of, they've cracked the code, they've solved the problem. Nobody wants to hear it because it doesn't agree, I guess, with kind of conventional wisdom. But economists have more or less found that the government can extract, I can't remember if it was 15 or 17%, but that's the number of GDP. That's what the government can do. Can't take more than that. It can raise taxes, but it can't get more than that amount of the GDP. You see, as it increases taxes, those taxes, first order effect is to increase income, but the second and third and etc. order effects is to damage the economy. That damage to the economy shrinks the economy. And so even though you have a higher effective tax rate, you have a smaller economy than you otherwise would have had if your growth was left alone. And so you collect about 15 to 17% of your GDP. And so it's been known for quite some time that if you leave the economy alone, that's how you maximize your tax collection, because you're going to get 15 to 17%, really regardless of what you do. So leaving the economy alone so that it can grow as quickly as possible so that your 15 to 17% piece of the pie can be as big as possible is the best way to maximize government income. And it is actually a way, you know, when you look at the government debt, obviously Canada is in massive debt right now because we have a man-child for a prime minister and a government. I mean, really, we have a man-child population. It's funny because I want to blame Justin Trudeau so badly, and I do think he is to blame, and I do think his government is terrible, but he was elected. And, you know, a large number of our peers here in Canada obviously voted for him. And you know what? I understand if, you know, you wanted to be able to smoke marijuana, or if you feel like women shouldn't be hassled when they're going to go, you know, do some family planning or whatever. I get that. Not that I think the conservatives were ever interested in taking that away from those women, but hey, whatever. I understand all that. I get if you agree with the dude on social policy or whatever. I just don't understand how you can be so irresponsible as to say, well, this person, I agree with them socially, so therefore, who cares about the financial future and everything else? It seems very strange. Right? It's kind of like if you go out with your buddy who's a really good guy, but he likes to party, and then you're like, well, forget it. I'll just spend my life savings partying with this guy because he's such a good guy. I mean, really, we have such an awesome time. We give homeless people hamburgers and shit when we go to the party. I'm going to spend my life savings, and then, it'll be good because we're doing good. We're giving out those hamburgers. Right, so that's going to work out for me long term. That seems to be the mentality of far too many Canadians. I don't understand it. But anyways, back to the whole tax situation, right? So this 15 to 17% chunk is all that they can collect. So your best bet is to allow the economy to grow as unfettered as you can, which of course we are not seeing happening in Western democracies right now, unfortunately. And that is actually how you can maximize your tax collection. One of the funny things is, again, the debt here in Canada is something that's obviously very worrying for everybody who thinks and cares about these things anyways. Yeah, it's relatively straightforward for a government like Canada to get out of that debt if it wants to. Now, our government is not going to do this, at least not for another couple of years. But in theory, it's very, very straightforward. You see, if you stop raising taxes and if you cut government spending, all you have to do is break even. You do not need to pay off your debt as a government. You only need to reduce your deficit to zero. It's a very tricky game governments play between debt and deficit. And a lot of governments will pretend that if the deficit did not increase, then they did not increase their indebtedness, which of course is not the case, right? Your deficit is how short you are from breaking even, right? And so our government runs a deficit each year. The deficit, of course, is different from the debt. The deficit is the amount that we're going to grow the debt each year. So a lot of governments will play a game where they'll say, oh, well, last year we ran a deficit of 250 million. This year we're running a deficit of 250 million. So we haven't increased the deficit at all. And it's like, yeah, but nobody cares. You increased the debt by $250 million by having a deficit again this year. So that is a game that gets played. But regardless, if they can just reduce the deficit to zero and then have the discipline to do that for 5 years in a row, what will happen is the economy grows every year. And so it almost doesn't matter what your debt level is when you're a sovereign entity like the government is. If you can just hold that deficit solid for a few years as the economy grows and your proportion of it in taxes, that 15-17% that you can effectively collect, also grows, your ability to service the debt will grow. And in about 4 to 5 years, on average, there are nations with more debt than that. But even for some of the most indebted nations, on average, 4 to 5 years of just not running a deficit would allow their economy to grow enough that they could then service all of their debt and continue their spending levels as if it was, they could continue their spending levels from 5 years ago and service all of the debt. So there is a very easy, straightforward path for our government to get out of debt. Unfortunately, it requires discipline, which means they will never, ever do it. It'll never, ever happen. And again, the reason why, if you want to know, read the book, The Vision of the Anointed by Thomas Sowell. I mean, he talks about it, right? These experts, and that's what you have in government, right? Government is a body full of experts, essentially. People aren't very smart. I'll give you the Spark Notes version. People aren't very smart. I'm not, you're not. None of us are. And you know that you aren't, because whatever it is that you're good at in life, and I'm sure there are things, perhaps things that you're phenomenal at, perhaps things that you're the best in the world at, there are also things that you know nothing about, right? I'll use myself as an example. I'm good at a lot of things. I don't need to get in details or brag. I'll tell you some things I'm not good at. I can't swim. Can't swim at all. Lots of people can swim. Lots of people who are way stupider than I am can swim, but I can't swim. Probably makes me kind of stupid, doesn't it? So we're all dumb in the sense that we have a very narrow range of things that we know, and there's a very broad range of things that we don't know. And the way that we navigate it, the way that we deal with this as humans, both as individuals and as a society, is very, very simple. Well, in part, we specialize, right? You know things that are of consequence to you, and I know things that are of consequence to me. Perhaps you've lived your life near swimming pools, and so you know how to swim. That was consequential knowledge to you. I did not live my life near swimming pools. I don't know how to swim, and I don't have an interest in learning how to swim. It's not consequential knowledge to me, right? Now, if, I don't know, fast forward a few years, my wee baby boy jumps into a pool and he's in the deep end there drowning, suddenly knowing how to swim will be consequential knowledge to me. And I'll be pretty screwed if there isn't somebody nearby who knows how to swim, because I can't save the kid, right? So the way that we compensate is we watch each other's backs, right? I don't know how to swim, but I don't know, Sean here knows how to swim. So Sean can jump in and save my kid. And maybe in exchange, I can help Sean. I don't know. Shoot, I'll talk to him about real estate investing, because apparently I can talk, but I can't swim, right? This is the exchange that we make. And this is how we make things work. The reason why it works is very simple. Our knowledge is consequential. That means we can use it consequentially in the world. It also means we can measure its effectivity or its effectiveness, its efficacy. That's the word I'm looking for. We can measure its efficacy by the consequences of using that or deploying that knowledge in the world. To go back to the swimming example, if I jump in the pool and I don't know how to swim, I'm not going anywhere, even if I can stay above the water, which I won't even be able to do that, so I'll drown. But I'm not going anywhere. Somebody who's a proficient swimmer can jump in the pool and they can do laps, right? When there's a child drowning in the pool 20 meters from the side of the pool, jumping in the pool and going nowhere, splashing around is useless. The consequential knowledge is being able to travel that 20 meters to save the child, right? The reason why experts fail and the reason why we have trouble with a lot of these government interventions is if you don't pay the consequence for your decision making, you will make bad decisions. So case in point, if let's just say we're playing, have you ever heard of the game The Sims? The Sims is like a computer game where you like control the lives of people. Whatever. We're playing The Sims, and now I am in control of this entire swimming pool situation, right? I'm now the expert. That's basically what The Sims is. I get to be the expert in the sense of like a god mode kind of a thing. Do I put in my example? Sorry, Sean, I'm picking on you, but Sean was my swimmer in my example, and I'm the idiot who doesn't know how to swim, right? And I've got a kid in the pool who's drowning. If I'm an expert, do I pick Sean or Aaron to jump in the pool to save the kid? Right? Now, the answer, it doesn't matter. You're all obviously like, well, obviously you pick Sean, right? But the answer in reality doesn't matter because as an expert, I don't care. It's not my kid. I don't care about the kid. I don't care about the consequences of my decision. I'm not impacted by the consequences of my decision. I don't know the kid. I'm not going to care about the kid. I'm never going to see the kid again. I'm not going to meet the kid's mother. It doesn't matter if I pick Aaron or Sean. To me, it's the same thing. And we're seeing this. I mean, you see this in our society. You've got it right now in the schools where they want to pick purple-haired lesbians instead of people who are focused on teaching children, right? You're seeing it. It happens all the time. Why? Well, because at the end of the day, if a child gets a bad education and they receive nothing but weird brainwashing and propaganda that doesn't serve them in life, the heck does the administrator who picked the purple-haired lesbian care? They don't care. It's not consequential to them, right? So they can now focus on things that are irrelevant to their goal or their mission because they are not subject to the consequences of their decisions. And we can contrast that very clearly. If I take that same exact school administrator and I transform them into a parent, does a parent want their child being indoctrinated by a purple-haired lesbian about whatever folksy issue is popular today? No, a parent doesn't want that. A parent doesn't care about that at all. A parent wants to make sure their kid knows how to read, write, and do arithmetic. So that hopefully that kid can grow up, excel in school, become a doctor, a lawyer, maybe a businessman, a CEO, ideally independently wealthy, whatever, right? That's what mom and dad are hoping for that child. But that's not what the school board administrator is hoping for. The school board administrator is an expert. They do not pay the price, the consequences of their actions. And you see this all over the place all of the time, right? When you allow individuals to be involved in things that they do not pay the price or the consequence for, then their focus inevitably will not be on the things that are important to that entity. Essentially, they become cancerous, right? Because their interests will be whatever their pet interests are, and those might be in opposition to the interests of the organization or entity that they're a part of, but they will pursue those interests anyways. And so, when the government steps in and they say, we're going to make housing more affordable, you as an investor need to understand that what is really being said is we're going to come up with some half-cocked scheme that will not work and almost invariably will make housing more expensive. That's basically what they're saying. And I can show you exactly how this would work. Let's just think about this. Let's just go through a real quick thought experiment. Because one of the proposals that I heard, and I love this one, is no sight unseen bidding. Okay, cool. Now let's just say that Natalie here gets a job in Calgary. She's moving from Toronto to Calgary. But the Trudeau government has put a new rule in place. You cannot bid on a property sight unseen. Natalie has to move up there in a month. Now, traditionally, what she would do is she'd go online, Kijiji, Realtor.ca, blah, 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 view it, seen it, whatever the heck website you want to look at. She'd find herself a property. Maybe she'd make some blind bids because she's not going to Calgary to see them. And maybe even one of those bids would go through and she'd buy a property and she'd have a place to live in when she goes to Calgary to start a new job. Now Justin Trudeau introduces this new bill. Well, no blind bidding. We're going to protect the consumer. Okay. Well, Natalie's that consumer, right? She's still got to move to Calgary. But now she cannot start her house hunt until she gets to Calgary because she can't make an offer until she's in Calgary to see the houses. So now she's going to move, right? Her employer expects her to start at the end of the month, but she's going to have to move. I mean, she has a job right now. She's got commitments, so she can't leave. When this month ends, those commitments end, and then she's going to move and her new commitments begin. But now they can't because she's not going to have a place to live. She won't have started the house hunt. She won't have done any of those things. So now she'll have to start that when she arrives in Calgary at the beginning of the month. Of course, not the best time to be looking for a property because now you're looking at next month move-ins at the best, assuming that we're talking about rents and not buying, but if we're either or, right? Now she's going to have to spend money on a hotel, or perhaps she'll get family accommodations, in which case that's in-kind compensation. And all of this economic activity is now going to be diverted away from Natalie just moving and starting her new job in a new place because the government thought that it would protect people if they weren't allowed to bid on things that they hadn't seen. So now, not only that, but now her employer who wants her to obviously hit the ground running in Calgary, well, she can't because she's got to go view 2 properties per day so she can put in offers, right? Because she can't put in offers unless she goes to see the properties. And of course, 25 people are putting in offers on each property. So now you're eating up the time of 25 people per property per day to go look at these properties, right? So that they can make offers on the properties so that everybody can feel good in their feelings that nobody made a bid without seeing the property first. And so you're going to cause untold millions of dollars of economic damage, right, to protect people from having to compete to buy things that they're still going to end up competing to buy. You see how you haven't solved any problem, you've just kicked it down the road, and you've not only kicked it down the road, but you've made it substantially less convenient for people for really no benefit. And of course, it'll get worse than that because how do we prove that you've seen the property? We're going to need to introduce some sort of government bureaucracy to do that, right? We're going to need to introduce the office of, I don't know, property visits and purchasing or whatever, where they can have some kind of registry for each property that's listed. And then they can put you on the registry when you come to visit it so that you can make your offer. And of course, now they're going to be a locus of corruption as people who have sufficient money say, I don't want to go visit these properties. Just say I did and I'll pay you a bribe. Right? And on and on and on and on and on. And so you can see how it becomes a mess. It becomes a nightmare, right? Because at the end of the day, all of the considerations are already included in the price of that property, right? Including the premium that you might pay because people are going to bid sight unseen, including the premium that you might pay to save you the time and effort of traveling out to sea, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's the purpose of the price. The price is supposed to communicate those things. Right? And the more that the government gets involved, the less useful the price becomes, the less it communicates anything about the underlying value of the thing that it's pricing, right? And that just leads to more and more and more market distortion. So it's kind of scary stuff in the sense that market distortion is a very bad thing and it can lead to some terrible outcomes. But when you hear this, the government's going to step in, they're going to make things more affordable. I mean, the reason that housing prices are the way that they are in Canada is because the government has been stepping in and making houses more affordable for the last 25 years. That's the maybe even 30 something plus. That's the honest truth. It's like the government has stepped in and all along the way, they've been doing things to make housing quote unquote more affordable. And they'll even tell you that, oh my God, houses would be like $5 million if it weren't for us, which of course is not true because how could they be, right? People can't afford that. So that's just foolishness to begin with. It was their government interventions that are causing the prices to be so high. And so I actually have a great deal of optimism about the valuation of the houses in all of the markets in Ontario pretty much. Because the government is so interested in stepping in and quote unquote increasing supply, which basically guarantees that they're actually going to reduce supply, which means supply and demand, your prices are going to go up. So I think that the future, that plus inflation, the future looks pretty good for real estate, from that perspective, right? And I just want to point out like how one other way, so just so that you fully understand the picture of how and why the government is not going to be able to reduce prices. The government steps in and says, we need more affordable housing. And so they step in and they say, we're going to put a $50,000 levy on all new housing starts to create a fund for affordable housing. You've heard stuff like that before, right? That sounds like something the government might say. Yeah, totally. So they put this $50,000 levy on. So, okay, so first of all, that's $50,000 of extra costs to the developer, right? They now have to pay this $50,000 tax. Just making my example really easy, $50,000 levy. What do they do? Okay, well, first things first. As a developer, I'm a reseller. So I make my money by putting margins on things, right? I buy it for $1 and sell it for $1.10 kind of a thing, right? So the government has just introduced $50,000 worth of extra cost. I'm going to make an extra, let's say, 10 points on that. That's another $5,000. So it's actually $55,000 of cost that you've added on the property, right? And maybe even more because, you know, I might have administration stuff I got to pay for as well as a developer to make sure I'm compliant. So we've introduced all of this cost. Okay. So now houses are $55,000 more expensive. Now, who can afford to pay $55,000 more for a home? Is it people looking for affordable housing, or is it people who are looking for quote unquote luxury, premium estates, et cetera, et cetera? The answer is, of course, it's the luxury people. It's not the affordable housing people. So now you've made it so that you've introduced a cost that makes it more economically viable for the developer to target wealthy, affluent clientele than poor clientele. So now instead of making apartments and low-cost housing, they are going to make high-end, highly finished, highly expensive housing. Okay. Now you're going to build this high-end, highly finished, highly expensive housing because that is housing that can be paid for in the marketplace, which is now going to lead to a further shortage of low-end apartments, cheap housing, affordable housing. Now the government can take their levy and they can spend their money. They can spend that $50,000 that they took from each of those luxury houses to build poor people houses. There's some problems, of course. First of all, the government's really inefficient. So really, they may collect $50,000 of taxes, but will be lucky if there's $30,000 left over after, you know, it's moved through the government's hands and it's been touched and spent on things. So let's just say we lose 40% of it, and then they're able to use that to buy houses, okay? Now they're going to build houses that they're going to give away to people. Free is a very good price. Now, if I'm a developer and my niche was affordable housing, perhaps apartment buildings, because that's one of the more affordable ways to build housing, I can't compete with the government just giving houses away. No matter how inefficiently they build them, my houses cost money. I have to pay employees and stuff for it, and I have to make a profit. If they're just going to give houses away, I can't compete. So now my firm, which was providing affordable housing and perhaps even had some expertise in it, right? We could do it for much cheaper than the other firms. I have a choice. I'm either going to go out of business because I can't compete with the government, or I'm going to need to find a new niche. Maybe I will also make luxury condominiums and estates, right? And so over time, as people adapt, because again, it's not about the first order consequences. It's about the second and the third. It's about the reaction to the reaction, the reaction to the reaction's reaction, right? As a developer now, I get out of building affordable housing completely. And now we have a complete dearth of affordable housing. And you see this, like, this is what Ontario was like, right? The government stepped in many, many years ago and said, we need more affordable housing. And we've now ended up in a situation where there is no affordable housing at all. We don't build apartments, period, right? They made it very hostile to landlords. There are no apartments being built. If you've ever tried to buy one, you'll notice they're all 30, 40 years old, because that's when the government passed laws for quote-unquote affordable housing, which meant no more apartments in the GTA, and now housing is just insanely priced, right? The housing is absolutely insanely priced, right? This is the consequence of these types of policies, right? Is they have these unintended effects and consequences that end up making the market less efficient. And market efficiency that's everything, right? Because that determines how much resources there are going to be left over to build new homes or et cetera, whatever it is, right? And so that's the situation we find ourselves in. Is we have a government and I think a populace who are very ignorant And so they're all inclined to say, "Daddy government, please save me from myself." And Daddy government is obviously not going to say no to that, or me. And in concert with each other, they've created more or less a crisis of housing prices, and they're going to lean into it because that's all. The only thing the government knows how to do is just interfere more. The government, historically at least, obviously maybe things will be different this time, but historically at least, the government has only had one strategy, which is mess with stuff more until things collapse. That's it. And there's a reason why there are no 2,000-year-old governments on the earth. Yeah, you ever think about that? There are old countries, quote unquote, but there are no old governments. You ever take that in? Why is that? Why is it that countries are things that endure, but governments are not? Look at Russia, right? Russia was a totally different government 40 years ago. Right? It was the USSR. Now it's Russia. And shoot, if you take Russia again, Russia was a whole different government again 130 years ago, right? When the communists first overthrew the czarists, right? Actually, no, I'm sorry. The communists didn't overthrow the czarists, did they? The communists overthrew the Republicans. I think the Republicans overthrew the czarists, and that was like 80 years prior to that, right? So that was oh my God, what's the name? The little, the Russian family, they killed them all. Disney made a movie about the little girl, the princess from, doesn't matter. But anyways, it's the famous family. They got slaughtered mostly in the rebellion, right? Because there was a monarchy at one point. So this is the thing, like the Romanov family. Thank you, Natalie. This is the thing. The government don't persist. Countries do, because what is a country? It's just geography, really. But governments don't. They don't actually persist that long, because in general, they just continue to make mistakes until they break things. And again, that goes back to this expert thing. It's something I really hope you'll take away from here. It's something you need to understand about experts and the advice that they give. It's useless. It's worthless. And the reason is because they don't pay a price. If you want good advice from anybody in any situation in your life, you make sure they have skin in the game. You make sure that the advice that they're giving you will affect their bottom line. Turns out that people are pretty good about giving good advice when it affects them. Right? If I go back to my sim scenario in the swimming pool, there is nobody who puts me in that pool instead of Sean if it's their child. You understand? There are plenty of people who put me in that pool instead of Sean. Whatever. Sean, I don't know what color you are. I'm obviously kind of a tan complexion. So maybe they'll put me in there because I'm a person of color, so to speak, right? And we need diversity. Everybody needs to see, our lifeguards, they need to reflect the community. So we're going to put Aaron, who can't swim, up there right now. I'm obviously exaggerating a little bit. I mean, I would hope that the people who have those opinions would at least make sure that the person can swim. Even if they're not the best swimmer in the group, they at least make sure that they can swim. But the point I'm just trying to make, right, is that when your decision makers don't pay the price for the decisions that they make, their decisions will not be good. Because at the end of the day, the thing that corrects all of us, doesn't matter how smart or how dumb you are, the thing that corrects all of us is that our mistakes cost us. Right? When you put your hand on the burner as a kid, it burned you. You didn't do it again. Right? When you teased the angry, mean neighborhood dog and it got off its leash and chased you all the way down the street, you didn't mess with that dog again. Right? That's probably not an experience any of you ever had, but you know what I'm trying to say, right? When you make a mistake, you fall off your bike and skin your knee, maybe next time you don't take the turn quite as sharply, right? That's the great correcting mechanism in life, is that when we make mistakes, we pay a price for it. And that's what allows us to learn and to become great. And so, finally, I'll full circle to real estate investing. This is a time right now where there's a lot of fear and uncertainty in the market for good reason. It's been messed with a lot. Okay? Practicing the fundamentals, understanding the product that you're investing in, and knowing that you're going on a journey and that nothing is for certain will bring you a great deal of success in this time period. And you need to understand that even if you make a mistake, even if you buy the wrong property, and I might, any of us could, it can happen. That will be a consequence that will teach you for future endeavors. And that can still make you very successful. Mistakes tend to make people very successful. if they allow themselves to learn from them. And so I know because the fear lives in me as much as the fear lives in you of maybe it doesn't, maybe it's different, but I know that the fear is there anyways, of making mistakes, especially ones that are going to cost you money. Maybe you buy a house, you pay too much for it, whatever. Don't sweat it too much. Focus on the fundamentals, do those things, and you probably will not make that mistake to begin with. If you focus on fundamentals, you're probably going to be okay. But remember, even if you do, you will learn from it. You won't make that mistake again. And I guarantee you, long term, as I've said so many times on this seminar, this is like weight training. This is a practice. This is a habit. This is not something that you do one time. You've made the decision. Oh, I bought this house. Now I'm going to be a millionaire. The only thing in life that makes money for you that works that way is called the lottery. And you're an idiot if you play it. I mean, you really are. The odds are not in your favor. I mean, don't get me wrong. If you win, that's cool. And hey, have fun with it. By all means, I'm not here to judge. I go to the casino once in a while. But I don't go to the casino thinking I'm going to leave a millionaire. I go to the casino thinking I'm going to pass a few hours. And it's going to cost me maybe whatever, my $40 or whatever my budget is. And then that's it. My fund is over. Because that's the nature of the thing. Otherwise, you're going to have to put some concerted effort in. And yeah, real estate investing, once you get it rolling, is going to require less effort than, say, your day job. But it's still going to require effort, consistent, and applied, towards your goal and your aims. And so take the leap, take action, practice, and see. And, I'm going to finish just on a little cliche. I remember this from my days as a child. I remember in school, I'm not that old, but I remember in school, they started giving out these agendas. And I think it was a government plan to make people hate planning and time management, because I know I hated those stupid agendas. But I remember in one of my agendas, there was this saying. They used to have these stupid little sayings. And one of these sayings, it was a cliche saying. It said, "Shoot for the moon. Even if you miss, you'll land amongst the stars." It's a great saying. It's very cliche, but it's beautiful. It's completely true. Shoot for the moon. You will land among the stars. I'll tell you, at least in one case, I bought a property shooting for the moon, thinking I was going to get all this massive cash flow. It would be a great deal. It was a very good property. It was very attractive on paper. I've never seen a cent of cash flow on that property in like 3 years of ownership or whatever. The property is worth more than double what I paid for it, but I've never seen the cash flow. So I shot for the moon. I missed it entirely, but I landed amongst the stars, and I'm not unhappy with my decision, right? And you likewise need to do the same thing. Don't stop worrying about all the negatives and the cons and the this and the that, and be focused on what's possible, on growing, on taking action, and on understanding that you don't get anywhere worrying about the maybe, coulda, woulda, shouldas. You get somewhere by taking action. And again, you might buy something that ends up losing you money, but it ends up introducing you to the right person that allows you to take things to the next level, right? You never quite know how life is going to work out. So, you got to learn in general how it works out, right? What strategies result in what outcomes most frequently, and then you optimize accordingly. And obviously, real estate is a strategy that leads to wealth often. And if that's your goal, it's no guarantee. There's lots of people who get in real estate, they never make a penny. But there's way more people who never get into real estate who never make a penny. There's lots of people who got into it and they do okay for themselves. And that's probably what will happen to you too, if you take action. But you got to take action, right? You got to be analyzing, you got to be buying. It's the reason why I made that sheet, the spreadsheet that I sent you last week, is just to make it that much easier, right? Instead of having to sit down and go through a full analysis, just punch in a few numbers and you've got an idea of whether or not this is a good actionable property, right? Just trying to reduce the friction between having the idea, I want to go look at this property, and maybe taking action, saying, hey, I'm going to put in an offer, right? So yeah, that's it for this week. I know it was kind of, I just talked. I didn't do too much of the analysis or the investing. I did have some stuff here I wanted to share with you, just some properties, but I didn't get around to it. So I had a $1.1 million sixplex up in Sudbury I wanted to show you, and some other things, just to give you an idea of what's happening in the marketplace, right? 'Cause things are still moving. They're always moving, and they don't slow down their weight. So, anyways, have a fantastic day. Please enjoy next week because there will be no seminar. I hope you have fun with your family and friends, and hopefully I'll see you the following week. Okay, so thank you again. Have a great day.